disease mixer, winning with prostate cancer, no fear necessary. So one of the things about flying, there's a sheet, and they have it in trucking too, it's called a manifest. Well, a manifest is what cargo you are transporting. In flying, you know, they have a manifest transporting. In flying, you know, they have a manifest also. It has the number of people on board. They call it is the number of souls. So once we get into an airplane, we're no longer a person. We are considered a soul. And that always fascinated me, you know, when I first started working at the airlines. You know, I worked at the airlines for 11 years. And I enjoyed working at the airlines because I was able to bump or come in contact with so many different people and to hear stories and to learn a lot. You know, I've flown over 1 million miles in my lifetime. When I heard them call passengers, once you go through that threshold, you become a soul. Talking about is how God has taken control of my life. You know, God has my soul. You know, my soul is in the trustee of God. Who's the captain and who's the FO. So sometimes you may hear, if you've ever gotten on a flight, you may hear the captain come on board and say, hey, the FO is gonna fly this plane today and bring us home. So sometimes the captain stays back and observes the first officer flying this aircraft. Most of the time, the captain is in control. You can probably tell when the FO finally has their first landing or they're just starting to land or to take off. There are still things and indicators that one is going to look at and put them in different order of importance or prioritize which one he needs to deal with first. And so as I'm going through this journey, I had to start realizing God sees the same thing. We're flying this aircraft together. I got to give him complete control. But there are times he tells me, Corey, you're going to fly it today. You're going to bring us home today. So what happened at the end of the year, God gave me control to land that airplane, to end my year, even though I was coming in on a rocky flight. He didn't give it to me in perfect condition. He gave it to me when it was a little rocky, a little unstable, because I need to learn how to deal with these type of conditions. He was there. He's sitting right next to me. But he's like, no, you're going to take this in. Being able to land that plane in the storm and bad conditions, windy conditions, the next time I'll be able to handle it. And I'm going to catch what I need to do early and change the priority of what indicators I need to look at first. That's why looking at our indicators for our health is so important. We got to know which ones we got to fix and we got to deal with. Just to haphazardly, you know, make changes to our indicator could be fatal. Attack them in the proper order, proper perspective. I get to land this plane. He's giving me the controls, but understanding that most of the time, let him fly it. I'm gonna let the captain fly it. I'm just the FO right now. You know, for a long time in my life, I've just been a passenger. He's elevated me to come up and sit in the cockpit with him. Some of us get in the cockpit a lot earlier. It took me 58 years to finally get over to get in the cockpit. Look at all these controls now. Okay, you've seen them all, you've gone to school, you've experienced a lot. Now let me see how you really truly navigate this flight and how you process all the information that's in front of you. But I know I got a captain sitting right next to me, and he allows me to have control at times. And when he says, I got it, I got to sit back and let him have it in its totality. So in the accounting world, the same things kind of happen. You know, when we're there and we have the staff, you know, on the audit team, you're going to have your staff people, your senior, your manager, and your partner in charge. But understanding who does what at what time becomes very important to the success of that audit. And that's very important from the auditor's perspective because we want to make sure there are not things that we missed or overlooked. So having proper controls in place becomes very important. And we have to make sure we don't lose those controls. So we're going to talk about the indicators in our lives. You know, when you go into a cockpit, it's just a whole bunch of controls. It's just like how they know how to do all this stuff. Well, actually, a lot of them are just fuses. But anyway, it looks like a lot, and it is a lot. It's a lot that you have to go through. And one of the things before you fly, you take off, is you do a pre-flight checklist. You know, you've probably been on an airplane where you see the pilots walking around. They're doing their pre-flight inspection. They got a checklist in the cockpit. That's why back in the day, you know, the pilots used to have these catalog bags, prepping just the aircraft itself to make sure it's in operable condition. So that pre-flight is never not done flying an aircraft, because that pilot knows they have souls on board. See, they don't have passengers anymore. A pilot knows I got souls. And when you hear souls as opposed to people, it sounds a little more intimate or a little more responsibility, because it is. Pilot makes an error or a mistake, he takes all those souls. I know that's why the FAA takes so serious about pilots drinking. You know, you can't fly an aircraft with so many hours between having your last drink. So now it's very important to understand I gotta have my body in its best shape. And what I've been going through these last 2 years is just transforming my body, just completely detoxing. This detoxification has affected my mind, my spirit, and my physical body. And it's brought all three of those in together. That's why this journey is so important to me. And it's hard for me to make certain decisions. So one of the things that it's hard for me to do anything invasive. You know, when a doctor came to tell me, hey, you have cancer, you know, of course their responsibility is to go right into telling you what your options are. And the options they laid out to me were, you know, chemo, radiation, or removal of my prostate. But all of them had side effects. They had physical side effects. What the doctor couldn't really tell is the psychological side effects. And you really can only get the psychological side effects by talking with people who have gone through it and tell you how their psychological perspective has changed. So one of the things I've done, you know, over these past several years, even prior to my diagnosis, because I've talked with other people that have had prostate cancer and have different procedures done. At some point I stopped making the cancer the ultimate indicator of how my life was changing or how it would end or how that flight would go. What I had to understand was, how was my life changing? How was me dealing with the prognosis? How was it changing my life? And what I started seeing were physical changes. I started seeing emotional changes. I started seeing spiritual changes. But the ones that stood out more than anything to me were the spiritual changes. Those are the ones that hit home the most. Those are the ones that are keeping me on this journey and allow me to reprioritize that checklist, looking at these gauges, what's most important. Because see, what's most important for me now is not the length of my life, but my relationship with God. That spiritual connection that I believe I have now, like I've never had before in my life. So all these things that doctors say they want to extend my life, I need to have one of these procedures. The physical side effects are not the issue anymore. The spiritual side effect, breaking that connection, that relationship I have with God, I don't want to lose. So I don't want to lose the captain. See, I'm still a FO. I just got promoted to be a FO. I don't want my captain to leave right now. So I believe that any of those physical things I do, I lose that spiritual connection because I've seen my spirit change, this relationship change by the detoxification of my body. The conversations I've had with other men with prostate cancer, how would it change? So I've been able to talk with men that have had all different type of invasive procedures. Some have had radiation, some have had chemo, some had removal, some have had both. And to have conversations and to hear how it changed their life, realizing that yes, they're still alive and they're happy. They've been here another 10, 15, 20 years, 30 years since they had the diagnosis. But some have told me if they had a choice, they would do it differently because of how they feel. So just being alive, sometimes there's a feeling that could leave us. I can tell you there's a feeling that's different about me now. I can't explain it. And I'm going to be judged by a lot by when I die. How long am I going to live like this? And some are just waiting to see. Not that they wishing bad, but maybe can I do it too? And I'm telling you, do what you think is best for you. But give yourself some options. Look at the gauges to make that decision. It's more than just looking at one thing to say, this is what's happening. This is what I need to do. Let's get control of our life. See, just because we got control of the yoke and we get to fly the plane, the captain's still there. The captain at any minute may say, let me take over, because they see you struggling. And so when I've struggled in my life, God has said, let me take over. Just like at the end of the year, he saw me struggling coming in. But what he did was, I'm not going to take over. Let's fly around and we're going to come in and approach it differently. Let's come back, fly around, and now you bring this landing in. He didn't take over. He allowed me to go through this rough landing that got corrected because I read the gauges. Yes, he was there to lead. He let me feel this whole thing going through. Fear, man, I almost messed this up. I almost messed my life up. I got these souls behind me. My family that depends on me flying this aircraft and making these good landings. So flying this plane, yes, you got the yoke and you're responsible for bringing it in and making this landing. So I want to thank you for tuning in to Moody's Mixer, Winning with Prostate Cancer, No Fear Necessary. Hope you enjoyed this episode. And please, if you get a chance, please hit the subscribe button, hit the follow button. Please make comments. Your comments are very important. Your comments help me understand my journey, but also helps those that are reading the comments going on in someone else's life that can help them who may be afraid to write or express what's going on in their life. So again, I want to thank you for tuning in to Moody's Mixer, Winning with Prostate Cancer, No Fear Necessary. God bless. See you next week.